We now have the state party chairman for the Republican Party in Wisconsin, so we'll return to the state Supreme Court race there. Susan Crawford, the Pritzker-backed neo-Marxist who's running for the state Supreme Court, one of the things that she has been hit on, as you might expect, being a leftist judge, is lenient sentences for dastardly criminals, like a particular case involving a child molester whose sentence was recommended to be a decade, and she meted out a 4-year sentence. This is an example of her leniency when it comes to predators, the argument goes. She responded to the criticisms of her on this local station, saying this.
The case you're mentioning, that was a man who had no prior criminal record. The first day he spent in jail was on that sentence. That's something we have to take into consideration as judges. And the prosecutor's recommendation is one factor among others. So I apply the law when I'm making decisions. I'm not there to just rubber stamp what the prosecutor's asking me to do. I take it very seriously and I consider it, but I'm there to, as a judge, make the sentence that I believe will keep the community safe. And that's a guy who's going to be on supervision until he's over 70 years old. I felt that it was a decision that is going to protect families and children and communities in Wisconsin. So I do stand by that decision and the other decisions that I've made as a judge.
Sure. Protecting families in Wisconsin for 4 years instead of 10 years. That makes no sense. But, it's one of those things, too, where you always hear from leftist judges, I don't just rubber stamp a prosecutor's recommendation. Have you ever sentenced more than was recommended within the bounds of sentencing strictures? That's a question that never gets followed up with these leftist judges, because I always want to hear when they don't take a prosecutor's recommendation because they want to impose a more stringent penalty that the law allows. It's always on the leniency side. You ever notice that? For more on this and this race, please be joined by Brian Schimming, the chairman of the state Republican Party in Wisconsin. Brian, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Dan, thanks for having me. And boy, you just nailed it. That is, believe it or not, I'm actually a Republican from Madison, Wisconsin. And
wow.
An anomaly.
Berkeley was full, and so we ended up there. And but you just nailed it. I mean, it's here you have a prosecutor's recommendation at 10 years. She does less than half of that. She's had cases, including this one, where the offender ends up out early, and in one case is living across from a school. So I mean, what does it? I mean, when I listened to that audio you just ran, she doubled and tripled down on what was obviously a lenient sentence. I mean, we've seen. I'm the only state chairman on the board of the National Republican Mayors Association, and I see this all the time on these urban liberal judges and sometimes even prosecutors, but certainly on the judges. But she is such an egregious case that it does not take a rocket scientist or the best lawyer in America or the best judge in America to come to the conclusion that to allow a sexual predator out of jail and living near a school is really not a great idea.
Well, what else has she done that you can inform us on?
Yeah, she has had a string of lenient prosecutions. I mean, in Dane County, which again is home of the state capital in Madison, very, very liberal town, she kind of stands out as a pretty liberal prosecutor. She's had repeated cases where I just don't understand what her misfire is on this issue with child predators and some of these other really dangerous criminals. It doesn't make sense, and there's so much attention to this now. The Milwaukee Journal, which is the state's biggest daily, did a review of the sentences handed out by the conservative in this race, who is former Attorney General Brad Schimming, versus the liberal, who indeed is Dane County Judge Susan Crawford. And Schimming, in almost every category, is a tougher sentencer than she is. what do liberals do when they get into these court contests or these, attorney general? They do the TV ads with a picture of them by a squad car talking to a cop, which is almost always a cop from, a leftist community. In this case, Dan and Amy, they've got Brad Schimmel, the former attorney general, has 80 current and former sheriffs, both Republican and Democrat, by the way. You know how many Susan Crawford has? One. And that one is from Dane County.
The national implications of this race are much discussed. We were just talking about them briefly before you joined us. But give us your perspective. Obviously, you've got money coming in from the outside on both sides. It's seen as an important race and a race that could impact the 2026 midterm elections at the federal level. Give us your sort of lay of the land in terms of what the implications of victory and defeat are.
They cannot be overstated how important it is for a couple of reasons. Number one, to your point, Wisconsin has had a number of close statewide races, and of course, most recently in the presidential race in November. Wisconsin's a little under 6 million people. 13 times in 26 years in Wisconsin, 13 times in 26 years, we've had statewide races decided by less than 30,000 votes. So here we sit now. I'm traveling in northern Wisconsin right now, and here we sit in Wisconsin right now in a very, very close race. The reason it affects national politics is that everyone, both sides, assumes that if the liberals have control of our court, which is a 7-member court, currently liberal controlled 4-3 after the conservatives had it for 15 years, if the liberals retain control of the court, they will redo the congressional maps. That is to say, the maps that we have 8 members of Congress, 6 Republicans, 2 Democrats. Everyone is assuming that the congressional map, which we've been under for 5 years now, will be reopened and redone. They will redraw 2 Republican congressmen out of their seat. Derek Van Orden out in western Wisconsin along the Mississippi River, and also Representative Brian Stile, who represents a district in southeast Wisconsin, just north of the Wisconsin-Illinois border.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know Ryan well. Mm-hmm.
Getting a lot of text messages here into the station. Republicans, Illinoisans who live near Wisconsin that want to help this weekend, maybe knock on doors or do something to help, put Brad Schimmel over the victory line. How can they reach you?
A couple ways to do that. They can go to our website. The state party's website was just WISGOP, WISGOP.org.
Okay.
You can follow me on Twitter as well, because I'm putting some of this out, and that's at Brian Schimming, BrianSchimming, at Brian Schimming. We need our friends from Illinois to come up and help. It's a national. By the way, it's now being estimated this race is going to go for almost $100 million, and it will. If the liberals retain this seat, they'll be passing impeachment resolutions against Donald Trump within the year.
$100 million for in a state Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. Wow. What has the state party learned, if there was something to learn, about what happened in November, where Trump carried Wisconsin, but Eric Hovde came up just short against Tammy Baldwin?
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? 2 years ago, so think about it this way. 2 years ago, Ron Johnson, our great Republican U.S. Senator, and Democrat Governor Tony Evers were on the same bench. 70,000 of the same votes. If that, I don't know which one of them stayed up later at night thinking about that, but probably Ron. But, it shows you how purple Wisconsin can be. But what we learned with Donald Trump is when the message is clear and people understand the differences, as they did in the Trump-Harris race, we win. And so as I go across the state, I've been I'm going to be in about 14 cities between now and Tuesday. I was in 3 yesterday. And when people understand the differences between the candidates and we don't try to, be too pastel about everything, we win. I always say, I'd always speak at the Trump rallies to warm up the crowd before the president came on. And I'd always say, look, the win is out there, but we have to go get it. I was the first state chair in the country to push early vote, which was not popular originally when I was pushing it. But I said to the president one day on the phone, he asked me to talk about early vote, which, by the way, in Wisconsin, you can early vote through tomorrow, Friday, end of business Friday at your local clerk's office for those listening, or if you know people here. But I said to the president, look, I love showing up on Election Day. I love going to the firehouse and voting. I see people. I know all of that. But I said, Mr. President, you know what I like more? And he said, what? And I said, winning. I like winning.
Yeah. Well,
because we got people to early vote, we won Wisconsin.
Well, so what's your handle on where the early vote is right now?
Interesting. I just saw a new number literally before I came on. 408,000 early votes so far in Wisconsin. And to put that in context, that now is about 150,000 more than we had in the Supreme Court race 2 years ago. So that's quite significant. There are increases in the urban areas, but we're doing okay in some of the more Republican counties around Milwaukee and some other places as well. So it's a hard read. One of the difficulties in Wisconsin is we don't register by party here, party registration. It's Michigan and ourselves do not have party registration. So sometimes it's a little hard to nail down where it's at. But I've been pushing early vote as I've been campaigning.
But you feel
today I will be today.
You feel good about those numbers, and I mean, just sort of using your just sort of knowledge of the environment. Do you feel good about those numbers in terms of what you're seeing in aggregate as well as distribution?
Yeah, my sense of the early voting is that it's somewhere between the loss that we had last 2 years ago on the court and where President Trump was in November. So it's not as good as I would like it to be, but we're certainly tracking ahead of where we were 2 years ago. So all the advertising I see here in northern Wisconsin, where I've been the last 2 days, is messages from President Trump to people. President Trump did endorse Brad Schimming, the conservative candidate, and so that message is out there big time. If you are a Trump voter in Wisconsin, or if you know Trump voters in Wisconsin, we need you to help save the president by next Tuesday, because if those two House seats flip, the president, that is going to make his second 2 years in office very difficult, and it could flip the House of Representatives.
All right, early voting runs through tomorrow. Obviously, the election Tuesday, so cheeseheads get out and vote, and cheeseheads people adjacent to cheeseheads,
right,
help them get out and vote, compel them to get out and vote. Brian Schimming, chairman of the Republican Party of Wisconsin. Brian, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank, a bank where relationships still matter. Signature Bank knows your name and your story. I'm Dan Proft, and I know this because Signature Bank is my business bank.
Hi, I'm Bob